Hello everyone, and welcome back to Sun Moon Audiobook, the channel where we share wisdom and inspiring book journeys to help you grow and develop your best self, inside and out. A cracked bowl sat beneath a leaking gutter, catching rain that fell like whispers from a gray sky. Not all the drops stayed. Some slipped off the edges, some bounced out from the force, but many stayed, gathering little by little into a still, quiet pool. Happiness, too, is like that. Not a grand flood, not a storm of joy, but a collection of moments, of tiny mercies, of soft shifts in how we see the world. And for those who feel like the bowl is empty, broken, or forgotten, this message is for you. You who are listening right now, maybe you've been trying to find happiness in all the right places or all the wrong ones. Maybe you've read the quotes, watched the talks, whispered affirmations like prayers, yet still some nights feel hollow. Some mornings feel heavy. That's okay. The Dalai Lama, a man who has witnessed exile, loss, and displacement, still believes with quiet certainty that the purpose of life is to be happy. Not as a hollow slogan, but as a deep, unshakable truth. And yet, he doesn't sell it like a quick fix. He doesn't ask us to smile when our hearts are aching. He doesn't say, just be grateful. Instead, he invites us to look inside to notice the patterns of thought that keep looping through our minds like old records, scratching the same wounds. He suggests that happiness is not found, it's cultivated. Like a garden. You plant, you water, you wait. And when the season is right, something stirs beneath the surface. The first seed he plants is a simple idea, that our natural state, beneath fear, beneath pain, is gentle, that we are wired not for competition, but for connection. Think about that. In a world constantly pushing you to compare, to be better, faster, more attractive, more successful, this is a radical thought. That maybe you were enough before you proved anything. That maybe your softness, your longing, your ache to belong, they're not weaknesses. They are signs you are still human. There's a tenderness in the way the Dalai Lama speaks about suffering, not as something to avoid at all costs, but as a shared human experience. He doesn't ask us to escape it, but to understand it. And in that understanding, to find compassion not only for others, but for ourselves. Because here's the quiet truth most of us are too ashamed to say out loud. Sometimes the harshest voice in our lives isn't someone outside. It's the one we carry in our own heads. The one that says, you should have done more. Why are you like this? You're falling behind. And what the Dalai Lama whispers back is, be kind. Not just when you're doing well, especially when you're not. He believes that compassion is not a luxury. It's a necessity, like oxygen for the soul. And not just compassion for starving strangers or sad headlines, but everyday compassion. Letting someone merge into your lane without irritation, choosing to listen when your partner vents again about the same thing. Catching yourself before sarcasm slips out in a moment of exhaustion. These tiny mercies, they are the rain that fills the bowl. They don't seem like much, but they're everything. And it begins with a shift in perception, from self-centeredness to other-centeredness. That doesn't mean neglecting your needs. It means understanding that when you help someone else rise, you rise too. Studies confirm it now, science catching up to spiritual wisdom. That people who consistently show kindness, who feel connected to others, are measurably happier. Their stress decreases. Their immune system strengthens. Even their hearts beat differently. Imagine that your very heartbeat changing with love. And yet, the world doesn't always make it easy. There are people who hurt us. People who disappoint, betray, ignore. What then? The Dalai Lama doesn't sugarcoat this. He acknowledges that forgiveness is not forgetting. It's not letting someone off the hook. It's letting go of the rope that's burning your own hands. Resentment doesn't punish the other person, it poisons you, slowly, quietly, until everything tastes bitter. But forgiveness, real forgiveness, is a form of freedom, and freedom is a doorway to joy. There's a moment, soft and fleeting, that I still remember. A winter morning years ago. The snow had fallen all night, covering everything in a hush. I saw an elderly man helping a neighbor shovel her driveway. His movements were slow, deliberate. He paused often to catch his breath. She kept insisting he didn't have to, but he just smiled, said something I couldn't hear, and kept going. I don't know why that stayed with me. Maybe because in a world rushing to get ahead, here was someone choosing to simply be kind, without agenda, without reward. And in that moment, it felt like the whole world softened. The Dalai Lama calls this an inner discipline, training the mind, like a muscle, toward habits of peace. And it is training. Just like you can't lift a weight once and call yourself strong, you can't meditate once and expect enlightenment. Happiness isn't passive. It requires effort. Not gritting your teeth effort, but the kind of effort that feels like returning to something you almost forgot. Your own breath, your own stillness. That's why he emphasizes mental hygiene. We shower daily, brush our teeth, care for our bodies, but what do we do for our minds? We let them run wild, often unchecked. Replaying past arguments, fantasizing future fears, the Dalai Lama invites us to sit with ourselves, not to silence the mind by force, but to watch it gently, like clouds passing through an open sky. And in that watching, we create space. Space for calm. Space for clarity. Space for choice. Because here's something rarely spoken. You don't have to believe every thought you think. You can notice it, question it, and gently let it go. That's freedom too. The moment you realize that thoughts are not facts, that moods are not mandates, that just because a storm moves through doesn't mean the sky is broken. He shares a story of a monk imprisoned and tortured, who later said his greatest fear during captivity wasn't death, it was losing compassion for his captors. Pause and let that sink in. What kind of strength does it take to keep your heart open in the face of cruelty? That isn't weakness. That's the fiercest kind of courage. The kind that changes the world, one soft act at a time. And maybe you're wondering, how do I start? What if I don't feel strong? What if I'm tired, jaded, numb? Then start there, with honesty, with a breath, with one moment of stillness in the noise. You don't have to become a monk. You don't have to renounce the world. You just have to choose, again and again, to return to what matters. Connection, meaning, inner peace. The mind, the Dalai Lama teaches, is both the source of suffering and the source of joy. That may seem strange, maybe even frustrating, if you're in the thick of emotional pain. How can it be my mind, you wonder, when the world around me feels like it's crashing down? When people leave, when jobs vanish, when health falters? But he's not dismissing real problems, he's inviting us to look at how we relate to those problems. Two people can experience the same event and walk away with vastly different feelings. The difference isn't always in what happened. It's in the meaning they gave it. That's where training the mind becomes a path not to escape life, but to meet it more fully, more gently, with more resilience. Think of it like this. The mind is a lens, and when it's clouded with anger, fear, jealousy, the whole world seems distorted. But if you clean the lens, if you practice awareness, if you breathe before reacting, if you pause to consider another perspective, the view changes. The world doesn't become perfect, but it becomes more livable, more beautiful even. One of the most profound shifts he offers is the idea that we are not alone in our suffering. This isn't just a feel-good sentiment, it's a truth that dissolves isolation. The next time you feel overwhelmed by pain, consider this. At this very moment, someone else may be in your city, maybe across the ocean, is feeling something almost identical. The same tightness in the chest, the same knot in the throat. And knowing that doesn't diminish your pain, but it opens a door to compassion. Because now, instead of being a single flame of sorrow, you're part of a quiet constellation of healing. The Dalai Lama calls this perspective universal responsibility, not responsibility in the burdensome, guilt-laced way, but as a calling, that how we move through the world matters, that our mood, our energy, our choices, they ripple outward. The smile you give a cashier who's had a hard day, the way you comfort a friend instead of judging them, the way you show up for a stranger who needs directions. These things shape the fabric of the world, slowly, steadily, like water shaping stone. And in a culture that worships individualism, that can feel radical. But even science is catching on. Look at someone like Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers, as most of us knew him. He didn't change the world with power or wealth or status. He changed it by showing children and adults that they mattered, that their feelings were okay. That kindness was powerful. And he did it by practicing the very principles the Dalai Lama speaks of: presence, compassion, emotional honesty. When people asked him about dealing with tragedy, he said, "Look for the helpers. There's always someone helping." And what the Dalai Lama adds to that is be the helper, even in small ways, especially in small ways. Because when you offer help, even silently, you remind yourself that you have something to give. And that reminder plants the seed of joy. Now, none of this means pretending everything is fine when it isn't. One of the most tender lessons from the book is that happiness doesn't require denying pain. In fact, it asks us to look at pain directly, not to wallow in it, but to learn from it. Every difficult emotion, anger, jealousy, fear is a teacher, not a dictator, but a whisper, asking us to listen. What am I really afraid of? What wound is still asking for attention? What belief is keeping me stuck? You don't have to answer all those questions at once. In fact, you don't have to answer them at all today, but just asking them, just becoming curious, begins to shift the energy. And that shift, however subtle, is a movement toward happiness. Because now you're no longer a prisoner of your thoughts. You're becoming an observer, and eventually, an artist, painting new meaning on the canvas of your life. The Dalai Lama also speaks to a common myth, that happiness comes from external success. We've all been taught this, in one form or another. Achieve more, earn more, be more, and then you'll be happy. But how many people do you know who have made it and still feel empty? Fame, fortune, even love, they can't anchor happiness if the mind is restless, bitter, or afraid. That's why he emphasizes inner values: contentment, patience, forgiveness. These aren't flashy. They won't go viral, but they are the quiet scaffolding of a joyful life. If you find yourself craving something right now, a new relationship, a better job, more recognition, ask yourself, what do I hope this will give me? Often, the answer isn't the thing itself. It's the feeling we think the thing will bring. Safety, belonging, ease. But what if you could begin to cultivate that feeling now? Not perfectly, but gently, through daily practices, through remembering that you are more than your achievements, that you are already enough, even as you grow. There's a reason the Dalai Lama laughs so often, even when speaking of suffering, even when recalling exile. It's not denial, it's perspective. He knows that holding on too tightly to sorrow squeezes out joy. But letting sorrow pass through, honoring it, learning from it, and then releasing, it creates space. Laughter then becomes a form of healing, a way of saying, I am still here, and that matters, and you are still here. Listening, breathing, maybe hurting, maybe hoping. That matters. Don't let the world convince you that your presence is small. It's not. Every time you choose kindness over cruelty, presence over distraction, you are shifting the energy around you. You are shaping the world. There's something deeply healing in the way the Dalai Lama speaks of acceptance, not as resignation, but as alignment. Acceptance isn't about giving up. It's about recognizing what is, without the extra suffering we layer on top. The situation is hard enough, but when we add judgment, resistance, denial, the pain doubles. Acceptance is like loosening the grip on a rope we've been pulling too tightly. It doesn't mean we stop caring or trying. It means we stop fighting reality with clenched fists and start meeting it with open hands. Think about how often we live in if only. If only I had more money. If only they hadn't left. If only I were more confident, more talented, more whatever. But life doesn't wait for perfect conditions. It unfolds in this messy, beautiful now. And the Dalai Lama gently reminds us that peace doesn't come when everything finally aligns. Peace comes when we stop demanding that it must. He tells us that genuine happiness is found not in chasing pleasure, but in cultivating meaning. Pleasure is momentary. It fades, it shifts, it often leaves us craving more. But meaning sustains. Meaning roots us when the winds of life blow wild. And meaning often comes through being of service. Not necessarily in grand gestures, but in the ordinary ways we show up. Listening deeply, giving without strings, holding space for someone's truth without needing to fix it. These are not small things. These are sacred. You, who are listening right now, may have already done more good than you realize. Maybe you comforted a friend at 2 a.m. when they were falling apart. Maybe you forgave someone who never said sorry. Maybe you smiled at a stranger on a day they were thinking of giving up. You may never know the ripple you created, but it exists. It matters. You matter. Another powerful lesson in the book is the difference between pain and suffering. Pain, the Dalai Lama says, is inevitable. It's part of the human experience. Loss, disappointment, illness, these visit us all. But suffering is optional. Not in a dismissive way, but in the sense that suffering is what happens when we resist pain, when we attach ourselves to fixed outcomes, when we believe we shouldn't be feeling what we're feeling. So what do we do instead? We lean in. We allow. We breathe. We recognize that emotions are visitors, not permanent residents. You are not your sadness. You are the space holding that sadness. And in that space, healing begins. It's easy to forget this in a culture obsessed with constant doing. But the Dalai Lama speaks often of stillness, of taking time to reflect, to meditate, to return to silence not as an escape, but as a return, a remembering. Because in silence, we hear the truths that get drowned out by noise. That we are enough. That we are connected. That we are not broken, we are becoming. And in that stillness, we also begin to touch something deeper. Gratitude. Not the forced kind. Not the checklist kind. But the kind that arises quietly when we realize what we already have. Breath. Shelter. The chance to grow. The chance to begin again. Gratitude softens the heart. It rewires the brain. And it reminds us that joy isn't found in having everything, it's found in noticing what we have. It reminds me of someone like Viktor Frankl, who survived the Holocaust and wrote about finding meaning even in the darkest places. He lost almost everything, but he discovered that even when we cannot control our circumstances, we can control our response. And in that choice, we reclaim our dignity, our humanity, our hope. That's the core of the Dalai Lama's message too, that we are not powerless. Even when the world feels overwhelming, even when our own minds betray us with fear or doubt, we can choose how we respond. We can train our hearts toward compassion. We can train our thoughts toward peace. We can become gardeners of joy, even in hard soil. But let's be honest, there will be days when this feels impossible. Days when the sadness is thick, the motivation is gone, the light feels too far. And on those days, you are not failing. You are simply human. The invitation is not to be perfect. The invitation is to return, to kindness, to breath, to the practices that root you. The Dalai Lama encourages us to build inner strength not through force, but through consistency, through daily effort, and through remembering that we are not alone. Whether through community, spiritual practice, therapy, or simple connection, he urges us to seek support. Because healing isn't meant to be solitary. Joy isn't meant to be hoarded. We heal together. We rise together. So what can you do right now, today? You can pause. You can place a hand on your heart and say, "This moment matters." You can send a kind message to someone you've been thinking of. You can forgive yourself for something you've been carrying too long. You can sit quietly for 2 minutes and just breathe. These small acts are not small. They are acts of love. They are how you begin to change your life, not with drama, but with devotion. And as you do, as you repeat these small mercies again and again, you'll begin to notice the bowl filling. Not all at once. Not in fireworks, but in droplets. Kindness, stillness, perspective, meaning. These are the rain. And one day you'll look back and realize you are no longer waiting for happiness. You are living it. In the quiet turning of these truths, there's a deeper rhythm one the Dalai Lama returns to like a heartbeat beneath all his teachings. It is the reminder that you already have the seed of happiness within you. Not a distant treasure to be discovered. Not a prize for achievement, but something ancient, humble, already planted in your being, like a lantern hidden beneath layers of dust and doubt. And the practices, the reflections, the compassion, the mindfulness, they are the gentle hands that wipe the dust away. Bit by bit, layer by layer. You may not feel it today. That's okay. You're not meant to feel joy every moment. You're meant to feel fully, to live honestly, to move through life not as a perfectionist sculpting a flawless statue, but as a human being learning to dance in the rain. And some days the dance is slow. Some days it's a quiet sway in the dark. But even then, you're dancing. Even then, you're alive. One of the softest, most radical insights the Dalai Lama offers is that the desire for happiness is not selfish. It is sacred. You are not wrong for wanting peace, for longing for ease, for seeking meaning in your struggles. That desire is the compass of your soul. And when you honor it not through grasping, but through turning inward, you begin to live differently. You begin to walk through life not as a stranger trying to prove yourself, but as a companion to your own heart. He talks often about emotions show they arise, how they deceive us, how they can be trained. Anger, he says, is a thief. It robs us of clarity. It inflames our minds, distorts reality, burns bridges. But beneath anger, there is often hurt. And beneath hurt, there is often fear. And beneath fear, always, is the desire to be safe, to be seen, to be loved. When you can trace anger back to its roots, something softens. It doesn't mean you excuse cruelty or allow harm. It means you see clearly and act with wisdom, not reactivity. That clarity is power, not the kind that dominates, but the kind that liberates. And it comes through self-inquiry, through the willingness to ask, in moments of pain or irritation, what am I really needing right now? And even more tenderly, how can I meet that need with care? This is what makes the teachings feel like homecoming. Not a list of rules, but a gentle returning to our essential nature, to compassion as a way of being, not just a feeling, to happiness not as a goal, but as a byproduct of how we show up in the world. And there's beauty in how simple he makes it. Not easy, but simple. Practice compassion. Cultivate patience. Choose forgiveness. Develop self-awareness. Accept impermanence. Appreciate the good. You don't need to master all of it today. You only need to begin, and to begin again, as many times as needed. You might think of it like tending a fire. Some days the flame is strong. Other days, it's only embers. But if you keep adding small twigs, kindness, presence, gratitude, the fire stays alive. And over time, it grows. It warms you and those around you until the warmth is not just a feeling, but a presence, a way of living. This fire, this gentle strength, can carry you through anything because it's not dependent on external outcomes. It's not threatened by change. It flows beneath the surface of all things, steady and sure. And even when life brings sorrow, and you will meet it differently. Not with collapse, but with grace. Not with fear, but with resilience. You will begin to live like a tree that bends in the wind but does not break. Like a river that flows around stones. Like the moon that shines even when the sky is heavy with clouds. That is the art of happiness. Not a destination, but a way of moving. A way of seeing. A way of being. And as this way unfolds in you, you'll begin to reframe the beliefs that once held you captive. You'll begin to realize that worthiness was never something you had to earn. That joy was never something you had to chase. That healing doesn't mean never hurting. It means learning to hold your pain with compassion. And to trust, even when the night feels long, that morning always comes. This is not just spiritual poetry. It's deeply practical because it shifts the ground you walk on. It transforms conflict into curiosity, anxiety into presence, emptiness into openness, and it empowers you not with ego, but with authenticity. The kind that says, this is who I am, this is what I value, and this is how I choose to live. You might still face stress, but now you'll notice your breath before reacting. You'll witness your thoughts before believing them. You'll choose connection over control. And these small daily choices, they change everything. If you remember nothing else, remember this. Happiness is not a luxury, it is your birthright. Not because life will always be easy, but because you always have the capacity to meet life with courage, with love, with presence. And that is what makes joy possible. And maybe the most tender truth of all is this. You don't have to be completely healed to begin helping others heal. You don't have to have it all figured out before becoming a source of light for someone else. The Dalai Lama returns again and again to the idea that joy grows when we turn our attention outward, not in avoidance, but in solidarity. Or when we stop obsessing over our own lack and instead ask, how can I be of service? Something quiet opens. The pain doesn't vanish, but it transforms. This is the paradox of happiness. The more we cling to it, the more it slips through our fingers. But the more we give it away, the more it fills us. And maybe you've already felt that, in the way your heart expands when someone else smiles because of you. Oh, in the quiet warmth of knowing you were there for a friend when they needed you most. These are not just niceties. These are the fabric of a meaningful life. It's not about martyrdom. It's about interconnection. About recognizing that when one of us heals, we all heal a little more. That your joy is my joy. Your sorrow is my sorrow. We are threads in the same tapestry. And when we strengthen even one strand, the whole thing becomes more resilient. The Dalai Lama is not naive. He knows the world is filled with injustice, cruelty, hardship. But he insists that cynicism is not wisdom, that bitterness is not protection, that closing your heart doesn't keep you safe, it keeps you small. And you, dear listener, were not made to be small. You were made to feel, to grow, to give, to love. Sometimes that love will hurt. It will ask more of you than you thought you had. But it will also heal you, stretch you, awaken you. Because love isn't just a feeling, it's a force. One that lifts, softens, connects. One that sees through masks and remembers the essence beneath. And that essence is always worthy. You don't have to go to a mountaintop to learn this. You don't need a robe or a guru or the perfect morning routine. The art of happiness can be practiced in traffic, in a messy kitchen, in the pause before snapping at someone, in the breath you take when your heart is pounding. It is not about escaping life, it's about entering it more fully. You can begin with 3 breaths, one for letting go, one for softening, one for remembering who you are. You can begin by asking, what is one small way I can be kind today? You can begin by looking into the eyes of someone you love and simply being there, fully. No fixing, no rushing, just presence. You can begin again, even now. Because the truth is, the conditions will never be perfect. The to-do list will never end. The world will keep spinning in its chaos. But within you, there is a still point, a sanctuary, a place untouched by noise. And the more you return to it, the more you can live from it. Not above the world, but rooted in it, with grace. And when storms come, and they will, you'll meet them differently. You'll bow, not break. You'll grieve, but not collapse. You'll feel deeply, and yet remain anchored. That is the strength the Dalai Lama speaks of. Not the hard, brittle kind, but the soft, enduring kind. The kind that bends like bamboo in the wind. The kind that carries others without losing itself. So, where does that leave you now? Maybe with a little more hope. Maybe with a soft ache of possibility. Maybe with a sense that something inside you has shifted, even slightly. That's enough. You don't need a lightning bolt. You need a whisper, a willingness, a beginning. And if you remember nothing else from this message, let it be this. Happiness is not something you wait for. It is something you practice. In this breath, in this choice, in this moment. So now, let's end where we began, with the image of the cracked bowl. Still catching rain. Still holding beauty. Still enough. That's you. You are enough. You are healing. You are growing. And even if the world doesn't notice your quiet courage, your daily acts of gentleness, they matter. They are shaping something sacred. Now, as you go back into your day, take one piece of this with you. Maybe a mantra. Like, compassion is my strength. Or, this moment matters. Whisper it when you need grounding. Let it echo in your heart. And if this message touched something in you, if you felt seen, or softened, or simply less alone, I invite you to share it. Like it. Pass it on. Leave a comment with your own reflection or a moment of kindness you experienced recently. You never know who might need your voice. And your presence truly makes a difference. Subscribe to stay close, to keep walking this path together. You are not alone. And as the light changes and the world keeps turning, remember, even the smallest ripple reaches the shore. You are the ripple, and the wave, and the sea.